The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
This is Voices in Validation, brought to you by IVT Network. IVT Network is your expert source for life science regulatory knowledge. Voices in Validation brings you the best in validation and compliance topics. We interview industry experts from pharma, biotech, med devices, and laboratories. Here is the host of Voices in Validation, Stacey.
Thank you, and welcome to another episode of Voices in Validation, a podcast bringing you timely interviews with industry experts from pharma, biotech, medical devices, and life science manufacturing. Each week, we discuss trending topics and industry best practices. This week, we are going to be speaking about the COVID-19 pandemic, as we are in the midst of that, and the increased demand for personal protective equipment. That's shortages, as you've probably heard, on masks and gowns and gloves and all kinds of other things that our frontline is using to treat patients. And to help us through this is Alan Schwartz. He is the Executive Vice President of MDI Consultants and retired from the FDA. So welcome, Alan. It's great to have you.
Good morning. Well, glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So as I mentioned in the intro, we are going to talk about COVID-19. In particular, we're going to talk about the increased demand and all the stories that we've seen around all of the PPE products out there and the shortage of them. And let's start with the masks and the N95 respirators. We've all probably heard, if you're watching the news, that they're in short supply due to the high demand, obviously, because of this pandemic, but also to decreased or low production from countries who normally supply us with those things, China, India, and Taiwan. So Alan, what can we do to conserve those, A, and B, are there other barrier PPE products in high demand too, or that are in shortage? So let's start with the first. What are we doing to conserve these items?
Well, Beth, let me explain my background and what we've been doing with companies. MDI is a consulting company that has been working with clients worldwide and helping them get FDA clearance and ensuring that they're in full compliance with the FDA regulations.
Yes.
Now, these masks, there is an EUA put out by the FDA. That's an emergency use authorization. Mm-hmm. Authorization, and they're trying to see what they could do to get more supplies. Now, as you know, the N95 masks that are in the U.S. that are making by 3M, and I think they're basically the main manufacturer. I was looking up the 510K log for the N95s, and 3M has the largest majority of those 510Ks. Now, the other way that they sell these N95 masks with the respirators was under the NIOSH certification. That's the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health.
Okay.
Now, these masks were basically used not in the medical and not for medical purposes, but more for the industrial purposes, like removing any kind of asbestos or other kind of work in the industry that would be dust, and they were trying to protect the workers from that high level of dust or possible air contaminants. Now, these masks are also used in certain instances in the medical area as respirators and masks, but it's not a normal mask that is used like for surgery. They usually use the surgical mask. Now, the surgical mask, the problem with the surgical mask is that there is a lot of medical device under the FDA medical device product codes. Now, if you look under the FDA definition of a surgical mask, which is 21 CFR 878.4040, it gives a definition. It explains that some of these masks, if they're used just as a protective mask, but not anything for antiviral or antibacterial or moisture protection. They are class 1 and could be sold. Once you add any kind of standard for protection, you need a 510K. Now, under the EUA, the FDA was allowing these NIOSH certified masks to be used as medical masks without getting FDA clearance. But if you were making an N95 mask and did not have the NIOSH certification, you're going to have to get the FDA 510K clearance. Now, the FDA is expediting under the EUA. They are pushing these 510Ks through at a much faster rate in order to get them to market. But you have to remember, you have to do the standard testing in order to get these masks ready for the 510K submission. And these are the ASTM standards that have to be tested against. Now, what hospitals are doing,
Alan, just to clarify for our listeners, because I have also seen the stories, and I've seen some things on social media about folks from the industrial trades putting out a call, to their colleagues, basically asking for masks and respirators from their industry to be dropped off at different clinics and hospitals. So I just want to make sure that I understand you correctly. These masks that may come as a result of this request, some of them may be NIOSH certified, as you mentioned. Some of them may not. And if they are not, then they're basically no good to the medical personnel. Is that correct?
Well, what I'm saying is that they might pass the required testing. We don't know. I mean, there are masks that we're getting inquiries for importing masks from Korea, from Taiwan, from China, from Malaysia. So, and they're all saying that they're N95. Some say they are Korean N95, and some say they're Chinese N95. We don't know what standards they are going to actually pass, and they have to have the testing here. Would they pass? Could they pass? They might be able to. Now, are they better than nothing? That's the problem. Are they going to give the protection that is expected of them? That's a problem. Right. Also, if individuals are buying these masks, and if you have a beard, it's not going to help you because then it's going to get through under the beard. So, everybody is scrambling. Everybody's running scared. And, and everybody's trying to take advantage. And we have to let them know what is the ramifications, what they have to do to legally export their masks to the U.S. and to get them in under under those registration numbers and properly registered with the FDA.
Right, absolutely. And so you mentioned the FDA is expediting, testing for certain masks to see if they can get them into circulation quicker. Do you have a sense of how long that's taking at this point?
Well, first of all, the FDA doesn't do the testing. The independent labs do the testing. Right. And then you submit your 510K application with the test results to the FDA. Okay. I mean, normally a mask would be maybe 3 to 4 months. I think that the FDA, because of this situation, is expediting, and probably within the 30 days, if not sooner, they'll review. As soon as they see the test results, the FDA will probably give the 510K clearance. So they are moving as fast as possible.
Right, and I'm sure they are. This has got everybody a little bit crazy right now. So I'm glad you mentioned some of the masks that are coming from other countries that have that might be marketed as the same masks we get here, but may or may not be actually up to the same standards we expect. Because another thing that I have seen recently in the news is, this whole idea of fraudulent activities by way of counterfeit masks and respirators. So 3M actually put something out in the news telling about imposters wrongly linking themselves to their company in an effort to sell counterfeit respirators and other PPE. So do you have a sense, is the FDA getting involved in this? What are they doing to try to stop this kind of behavior and protect our frontline responders?
Well, good question. I'm not sure if you are aware of it or not, but the FDA is not sending out their inspection investigators to do any on-site inspections. Basically, these people are at home, and whether they're on vacation, a paid vacation, or they're actually doing work. I think one of the things that the FDA will probably be asking them to be doing is scanning the internet and seeing what claims are being made by these bogus items in order to make a killing. And they'll probably end up sending them warning letters. We are starting to monitor the warning letter activity, and you're going to probably see a very large increase in warning letters sent to these people that are abusing or trying to make a killing on bogus products. This happened during the H1 and also the swine flu, where we saw a high increase in warning letters for masks and gloves.
Excellent. Okay, so there are repercussions to these behaviors. And to your point, I know the FDA is working to get as many of these PPE products back or into the market as quickly as possible because there is such a shortage. And I saw this week that the FDA approved changes for U.S. manufacturers, allowing medical device makers to make changes more quickly and easily to existing products, such as changes to suppliers or materials to help address the current manufacturing limitations or the supply shortages. So how do you see this impact the quality of these products in the short term, or do you? And what impact do you think it may have on the industry in a more long-term scenario?
Well, and again, an interesting question and scenario right now. I mean, the president has been given the ability to tell companies to make certain products. Now, a ventilator is not an easy product to make. Plus, you need all the components. You need instructions and all. Now, the manufacturers of ventilators are probably gearing up as many as they could do. Now, can you go to an automobile company or a very high-tech company that makes non-medical products to make these products? Absolutely. Will they be in FDA GMP compliance? Probably not. Right. Will they are all probably ISO certified, so they have good quality systems in place. So what the ventilator companies have to do is making sure that they're able to get to these companies their complete set of manufacturing instructions, which is part of the QSR compliance. It's called the device master record and the device history record, and then train their staff in what they have to do to assemble these devices once they give them the kit with all the components to put it together. How fast can these companies get up to speed? If there are good quality systems in place with good production line workers, it shouldn't be too difficult to do that. So I would suspect that the quality should be there, but the inspections and the final inspections are going to have to make sure it goes through all the testing that is needed before they release them and ship them. And then again, you're going to need boxes for shipping or other containers to making sure that they get to the end user that meets their specs. And now you need containers, cartons, or I think they're normally put into like a suitcase to be shipped out. So, there is a whole line of logistics to get all the parts for these devices to be able to be made. They just can't be made overnight because you want to make them overnight. I think the quality could be maintained with the organizations that they're going to ask. We are getting inquiries now from very large companies to make a mask. And I told them, by the way, you got to be under FDA quality systems. And they go, what is that? And it said, you have to have it tested. They say, what is that? So everybody's scrambling, trying to help, but they have no idea about the medical device industry and what the requirements are going to be in order to be making sure that they meet all the standards necessary to making sure that they're safe for their use.
Excuse me. Right, exactly. And these manufacturers, although well-meaning, I mean, it's going to be costly, I would think, in some cases for them to, I understand the processes for manufacturing may be there, but the same regulations that are required in medical device are not required in very many other industries. So, the quality and sterility is going to be an issue for them, and they're going to have to put some sort of protocol in place. And I'm just wondering if that's going to be cost prohibitive for some of these companies.
Well, they're all looking at the billions of dollars that the federal government is putting out and trying to use this for the healthcare and for the PPEs. So I think they're looking to use their staff. Like we're seeing Ford wanted to make masks. They were going to use their CAD or their laser printer for building N95 masks. And then they need to get the insulation that goes inside the mask. So we have a company building N95, and they're trying to get the insulation to put in the mask. So it's not that easy just to have the shell.
Right.
So there's a lot of things.
Supply chain is suffering right now. There's a lot of products, pieces, components of these products that are just not available or are available in limited supply right now.
Well, in order to get the material, then you got to go to the people that make the material to make the material to get them out to the companies that can make the mask. And then you got to cut them in order to put them into the N95 mask. So, I mean, it's a very, very difficult logistics chain to making sure that you can get these masks and get them, out to the end user as fast as possible. It's not just overnight.
Right. Right. And so there's still going to be a delay, even if, everyone starts now and they're moving as fast as they can. We're still going to see the shortages for the next few weeks or months, possibly.
Well, the shortages, I don't think they could ever catch up to the shortages because as many as they're making are being used. My daughter works in a hospital. She's a PA, and she works in the heart of New York. And what's going on there and what the supplies are, they're telling her to use her N95 mask. She's getting one a week.
Okay. Yeah. And they're supposed to change that every time?
Well, normally you would throw it away and get a new one after you use it. We don't know how long the protection is going to be when she's breathing in with moisture and everything. Exactly.
And so those are the things that they're going to have to, I guess, contend with. And I know that there's some suggestions have been made. So in the new guidelines or the new information that the FDA put out this week, in response to COVID-19, they're also recommending manufacturers, both foreign and domestic, to apply for emergency use authorization EUA. You mentioned that at the beginning, to distribute these products in the United States. And so in a follow-up question to your comments, as this is a global pandemic, obviously we're trying to fight it here in the US, but so are folks in just about every other country in the world. So what do you see, recognizing that we need to engage all suppliers and all manufacturers who are able to produce these products and get them into the market? The U.S. isn't going to be the only one receiving these products and asking for these products. So Is this approach too little, too late? What do you think?
Well, too little, too late is an argument for the future to see how this is going to pan out.
Right.
Whether our government had a shortage after H1N1, and they never replenished their supplies in their stock rooms. So, there's a lot of blame everywhere to be thrown around, and how fast we could get up to speed here, and how fast this is going to be contained in the U.S. Now, a lot of these companies around the world are going to go where they could make the money. And everybody was looking at the billions of dollars that the U.S. has. And as we know, that the U.S. dollar is still worth more than most of the dollars around the world. So, especially if the world is coming down to a halt. I just spoke to friends of my office in Israel, and, they are shut down. Then I'm speaking to people in China, and though they're getting back up to a little bit, for the most part, they're not nowhere near getting back to normal, though they're claiming people are going back to work. And they still and people are walking around with masks. So, where the market is going to be is who's going to be able to pay for this and get this product to market faster at the best price, as you can well imagine.
Exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Alan, is the industry seeing the same kinds of shortages with other PPE products? I mean, I know that the masks, especially the N95 masks, are the most necessary in terms of breathing in, the air around these patients. But what about gloves, gowns, and other types of barrier?
No, I have the only shortage we've seen was for the alcohol disinfectants, where everybody was trying to scramble for that, and the mask, whether a surgical mask or the N95 mask. And I have not seen much request or people to bring in the gowns, though we've got a few inquiries on that. And but I haven't seen the kind of demand where people are saying where I could get that. So it was mainly the mask. Now, the N95 or this virus is more of not air transport transmitted. It was more of water particles that are being transmitted, and of course, washing your hands so you don't rub your eye or nose where you could actually enter more. So the face mask, the surgical face masks that are designed to prevent the moisture, is the hot one also.
Okay.
And our client, we have several clients, and some of our clients are on backlog. Cannot do production at 5-6 months backlog.
Okay. Wow. So, so going back for a second to your point about your daughter having to use her mask for clearly a much longer period of time than it was ever intended to be used. The FDA, to try to protect people like your daughter, also changed its stance recently on personal swabbing for testing of COVID-19, citing that the testing conditions are safer for frontline medical personnel in addition to lowering the drain on PPE resources, which basically means that patients are doing the swabs themselves to test for this virus, being aided by medical personnel. So how do you see this impact the reliability of the test, A, and B, it seems to me like greater margins for error or false reads come into play when we start taking this test out of the hands of medical professionals.
Well, I'm not sure what you're looking for. I mean, first of all, in my daughter's hospital, they are not testing the staff if there's no signs.
Right. So this is not referring to the staff. I've been reading that people, the general public, who may have signs or symptoms and are coming to either a clinic or a hospital setting to be tested are being allowed to do their own swabs.
Well, yeah, that's not a good idea. Matter of fact, I think in Jersey recently they said that some of the people doing the swabs didn't do a good job. So and so the test didn't come out, or it might have been false tests. So I think in New York, my daughter was telling me they were paying $135 an hour to medical professions to do the swabbing. So there's a real need for licensed practitioners to do the swabbing. I don't think it's going to be a good idea for non-professionals to do the swabbing.
Right. Yeah, and that was my sense too. I worry about the reliability of the test, just because it's of user error. And then, of course, you see the increase in false reads. And I feel like that has the potential to start its own, sort of chaos separately.
Well, you know what? The point is, say you have a population, say 1 million people, and say 100,000 are tested. Say about 100,000, 50,000 that were tested have the virus.
Right.
Now, say the 50,000 that were tested that don't have the virus stay home. Now, say the other 900,000 that weren't tested might have it and might not have it. So if they do stay home for 2 weeks, and then they don't show any signs, that should be a good indication that they don't have it any longer.
Right.
That's what they're hoping for.
Sure.
So if everybody feels comfortable and is going out because they feel they don't have it, but they might have it, they might reinfect or infect others. So that's why they're asking everybody to hold off for a couple of weeks. That's where the president was thinking that he would like to get people back to work, in 3 weeks.
Right.
Will that work? It all depends how cooperative everybody is that don't have any symptoms, may have the virus, but would get rid of it or would feel better, or the virus would run through them in 2 weeks.
Sure.
That's what they're trying to do.
And that makes sense. And I understand that. I think that for the most part in my area, I've seen most people trying to follow the rules and comply with the request to social distance and, not go out to restaurants and bars. And I mean, obviously, all of those things are now closed. But even at the beginning, I definitely saw a concerted effort by the public to at least by most people to follow through with that.
Well, except the Florida where they allowed these kids to party.
Right. Yeah.
And I call them kids. They're not kids. They're young adults. And now I just spoke to my office in Florida, and they think that Florida might be the next epicenter as a result of that situation.
Right. Well, I will hope that is not the case. So, Alan, just in follow-up to all of this conversation, I wonder, because you've been doing this so long, and so it made me think, with all of the drug makers and medical device manufacturers working so diligently right now on COVID-19, whether they're looking for treatments, vaccines, or device manufacturers motivated to meet the demand for PPEs and test kits and other necessary supplies. Do you anticipate a much larger impact to the industry long term because the focus has been shifted away from all of the other things that they might have been working on?
No, as a matter of fact, we're still getting a lot of inquiries for other medical device 510Ks. Look, the medical industry is the medical industry, and people know that this is only temporary, and then things are going to get back to normal. We don't see saying everybody say, "Oh, I'm going to shut down and not go back to work," or all of a sudden there's not going to be a need for other medical devices. I can give you an idea of some of the inquiries we recently received for things. We got wound dressings and vacuum pumps and IVD tests, and thermometers are needed. All thermometers need 510K. So right now, most of the inquiry, and then we just got an inquiry for device batteries, laparoscopic process equipment. So there is still, people are still inventing new products, still want to get to market with their products. So I don't see this stopping that. I think it's just a concentration of everybody that sees an opportunity to make some money and to get their product onto the market as fast as possible.
Sure. Well, I'm glad to hear that that you don't see an impact, because I worry sometimes about the smaller companies, not being able to compete at this time.
Well, the smaller companies are, they're going to maybe take. Well, it all depends. If they're selling medical equipment to hospitals, they're going to need it. If they're selling home care products, they're going to need it. Because more people are at home. So, if you're looking at surgery procedures, no, my daughter works in surgery, and most surgeries, unless it's emergency, are closed down. So, it's interesting how things are shifting.
Exactly. Well, the one thing is I am glad that so many people across the industry are coming together, for the benefit of everybody here in the U.S. So there's the positive. The other thing that you brought up was this EUA for medical equipment.
So now my daughter is seeing that one ventilator is being used for two people. Now they were also looking at apnea devices that people use in order to help people breathe by giving them a positive pressure, though it might not be used as a ventilator. So they're allowing that. They're allowing companies to convert some devices to ventilators. That's where this EUA is coming for the medical device area. Though the FDA wants to make sure that they're safe for their use and that whoever's doing this understands what the complications are.
Absolutely. And I think we're going to have several more weeks of creative thinking like this. And I'm glad the FDA is working around the clock to try to make sure that any of these temporary fixes are safe, because it could be a much worse situation if not.
Well, that's what we hear. We hope that this thing can get to that leveling off so they could smooth it out, and that that our numbers don't keep increasing, and we finally get a spike and it starts working its way down. But right now, as more people are tested, more people are going to be shown positive. But we hope that the death rate comes down and it could be more under control.
Of course. We need to protect those populations that are at risk. But there's a lot of folks who have strong immune systems, and hopefully this disease, if they get it, will just work its way through their system, and like many other viruses, and that will be in a better place in a few weeks.
Right.
Well, Alan, I want to thank you so much for being here with me today and talking about this very timely topic. I know it's an important topic and something that's on the top of everybody's mind right now. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to do that. Before we wrap, do you have any other parting thoughts or things that you want to share with our listeners?
Well, not really. I think we covered it all. I don't want to, rehash it.
Of course.
I think a lot of companies are trying to step up. A lot of companies are doing their best in order to try to get supplies in, and we're trying to help them and give them the guidance that they need to understand what is going on. So hopefully this thing will get through the system, and we could get through with this in a couple of months and get back to normal.
I agree. Well said, Alan. Thank you so much again. I really do appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to our producer, Ben Kitchen, and the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. And I also want to give a big shout out to you, all of our valued listeners. So if you like Voices in Validation, we encourage you to subscribe in your podcast player of choice. That way you'll never miss an episode. And don't forget, share it with your colleagues and your online networks. And for more information on the podcast or for today's show notes, please visit the IVT Network website at www.ivtnetwork.com. We will be back again next week with more great interviews. Until then, stay safe and healthy.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.